Hello and welcome back to Effective Navigation Development. In this video we're going to get started on our first navigation system, and you can find this file in your source files folder. It's called nav1.psd, and the idea behind this particular navigation menu is it's something that I want to be able to create using only HTML and CSS. We're not going to cut this up into images and use images. We're going to use all text, all HTML and CSS. And even the drop-down menus are going to be coded using CSS. Now, if we jump over to our layers, we can see that we have separate folders for our hover state. So if we turn off the portfolio hover state, we can see it in the up state. And we can turn on and off any of these layers to see what the hover state looks like. So for this particular menu, whenever we hover over the button, the background's going to go dark. We're going to have a slight glow around the text, and then we're going to have a drop-down menu for a couple of the buttons that show up with another list inside them. So this entire menu is going to be an unordered list, and then each of the submenus is going to be another unordered list within that particular list item. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. But if we jump into our browser, we can see what the final file is going to look like. And this, again, was all done using HTML and CSS. There's no JavaScript, no jQuery, no images. It's all text. So if we hover over the home button, we see a slight glow around the text and the background darkens up. The About button has some sub-nav options here. The Portfolio button has the same options, so does Services, and then our Pricing and Contact are just simple buttons. And in this video, we're going to get started creating the HTML for this particular file. So I'm going to jump over to Dreamweaver, and you can use any text editor you want. I actually usually use a plain text editor, but for the purposes of this series, I'm going to use Dreamweaver because it's easier to jump back and forth between design and code view to see what we're doing. Also, Dreamweaver gives us some helpful defaults when we create our files. So I'm going to create a new HTML document. So we'll click on HTML. And I actually want this to be HTML5. So I'm going to get rid of all of this on the top line. And our doc type is just going to be HTML. Also for our HTML tag, I'm going to get rid of everything except for HTML. So now we have an HTML5 document. For our title, I'm just going to call this Nav1. And then in our body, we're going to start building out our file. So again, this is going to be, the menu itself is going to be an unordered list. I want a little bit of space above that list though. So I'm going to start with an empty paragraph. So we'll put our paragraph tag here, and I'm going to put a non-breaking space inside that. So ampersand NBSP semicolon, and that just inserts a space. And then our closing paragraph tag. So that'll just give us a little bit of space at the very top of the document. And then on the next line, we're going to create our navigation menu. So we're going to create a couple of lines of blank space there just to make it easier to read. And then I'll put our opening nav element and our closing nav tag. And again, this is HTML5, so the nav element is a new element within HTML5. And it simply signifies anywhere that a navigation menu is going to go. So again, I mentioned that our nav is going to be an unordered list. So let's create that unordered list here. And I'm going to give it a class of main nav. Since this is the only one, you could use it as an ID, but I try to stay away from IDs as much as possible. So I'm just going to use a class. And then we'll put our closing unordered list tag. Inside those tags, we're going to have a list item for each of our buttons. So we'll have a list item for our home button, and each one is going to have a link in it. So inside that list item, I'm also going to put an anchor tag. And for the purposes of this series, I'm just going to use the pound sign for our URL for these links so that it just links to the current page. And then we'll put our text. So we're actually going to have two lines of text for each of these buttons. If we look at Photoshop again, notice that we have the name of the link, home, and then we have kind of a little subtext here where the heart is. So we're going to put those in separate spans. So let's jump back into Dreamweaver. And inside our anchor tag, we're going to put our first span. So span, I'm going to set a class to this. And our class for this is going to be nav name. And then I'm going to create another class called yellow. And that's going to change the color of our text. And we'll get to the CSS for that later. But for now, we're just creating a class called yellow. So we have two different class names assigned to this specific span, nav name and yellow. So we can refer to this span using either one of those class names. And that's going to be important later on. But we're going to type in our text inside that span, home, and then our closing span tag. And then I'll just jump down to the next line and create our next span. And this is going to be the subtext. So let's give it a class of nav DESC for nav description. And then we'll type in where the heart is. Now notice that I'm typing this all in lowercase, but the menu itself is supposed to be all in uppercase, and we'll take care of that in CSS as well. And then I'll put my closing anchor tag there. So we have two spans within our list item. We have, first of all, we have the anchor tag, which contains the whole thing, and then we have a span that contains the home text, and then another span that contains that subtext. And then after that, we'll put our closing list item tag. So we're going to have 6 separate buttons here. So let's just highlight that, copy it, and then paste it 5 more times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So our second button is going to have a different color. Our second one is going to be purple. We have purple, green, red, blue, and orange. So let's change those here. Purple, green, red, blue, and orange. And again, we'll define what those classes mean, what those colors are in our CSS, but they're all going to have the nav name attribute so that we can set some styles for that larger piece of text at the top of each of our links. So our second link is the about page, so we'll change that from home to about. Our third one is the portfolio page, or the portfolio link. Then we have services, pricing, and contact. So then we have our subtext for each of these. For the about link, the subtext is meet the team. For the portfolio link, see our work. For the services link, what we offer. For the pricing link, what we charge. And finally, for the contact link, get in touch. So that sets up the basic navigation. Let's jump into design view just to see what that looks like. And it's nothing fancy. It obviously doesn't look anything like what we want it to look like just yet, but it's a good start. The last thing I want to do in this video is I want to throw in some dummy text down here at the bottom. So let's go back into code view. And then underneath our closing nav tag, I'm going to skip a couple lines and create a div with a class of body content. Skip a couple lines and put our closing div tag. And then inside that div, we're going to put some lorem ipsum text. First, let's put a title here. So just a h1 tag. And this is our first navigation menu. And then we'll put a few paragraphs here with some lorem ipsum text. I'm going to go to a website called lipsum.com. It's a lorem ipsum generator, and what we can do is scroll down here towards the bottom, tell it how many paragraphs we want, or how many words, bytes, lists, whatever. I'm going to do 5 paragraphs, and I don't care if it starts with lorem ipsum, so I'm just going to uncheck that and click generate. So on the next page, it gives us a few paragraphs, and we can just copy the text from those paragraphs. I don't really want 5 paragraphs, I just want about 3. So I'm going to grab the top 3 paragraphs here, copy them, jump back into Dreamweaver, and paste. So I've already put the opening paragraph tag for our first paragraph. At the end of that paragraph, we'll put our closing tag. We'll go to the next paragraph, put our opening paragraph tag. I'm going to indent that like the last one is. Put our closing paragraph tag down here. Oops. Our next paragraph, we'll indent it, put our opening paragraph tag, and then at the end we'll put our closing paragraph tag. All right, so that does it for now. Let's just take another look at design view. And there we go. Now we have some contents to go with our page. Looking good so far. Obviously, this isn't anything like what we want it to look like, but we'll get there. As you may have noticed, we haven't touched the sub-menu items yet, and we'll get to that later on. First of all, I want to make sure that we can get our main menu looking okay, and then we'll add the sub-menu later. But for now, let's save our file. I'm going to hit Command S or Control S on a PC, and then inside the Project Files folder, I'm going to save this as nav1001.html. So we'll save that, and we'll move on with the next video. Thank you for watching.